It's another business week. Welcome to Business Morning. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago. We'll begin on the global oil market scene as prices fell in Monday morning trade today, parrying last week's gains on worries a global oil glut may persist amid slumping demand and U.S.-China trade tensions that could restrict an economic recovery even as coronavirus pandemic lockdowns start to ease. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell as low as $18.10 a barrel earlier in the session and were down $1.14 at $18.64 in the morning. The benchmark contract rose 17% last week. Brent crude futures were down 24 cents or about 0.9% at $26.20 after touching a low of $25.50. Brent rose about 23% last week following 3 consecutive weeks of losses. Now, the market found support last week on signs of reduced inflation rates and as major oil producers led by Saudi Arabia and Russia were set to begin cutting production on May 1. The top 2 U.S. producers, ExxonMobil Corporation and Chevron Corporation, each said they would cut output by 400,000 barrels per day this quarter. The output cuts, combined with the loosening of business restrictions in some U.S. states and cities around the world, were expected to ease the global fuel glut and pressure on storage tanks, helping to drive prices up last week. In the meantime, the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Bankers Committee have directed all banks not to sack any of their staff. A special meeting of the Bankers Committee was convened over the weekend to further review the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Nigerian banking industry. The committee particularly deliberated on the issue of the operating costs of banks in view of the disruptions emanating from the global economic difficulties and decided that in order to help minimize and mitigate the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on families and livelihoods, no bank in Nigeria shall retrench or lay off any staff of any cadre, including full-time and part-time. And to give effect to the above measure, the express approval of the Central Bank of Nigeria shall be required in the event that it becomes absolutely necessary to lay off any such staff. The Central Bank of Nigeria solicits the support of all in the collective effort to weather through the economic challenges occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, it's another roller coaster of hopes and fears as the gradual easing of the lockdown announced by President Muhammadu Buhari begins today in Lagos, FCT, and Ogun State. There is no doubt the lockdown has brought hardship on a lot of Nigerians. Many who live on daily earnings were voicing that they cannot continue to stay in lockdown without food to eat. But there is a health issue to be dealt with here. But for how long would people continue to stay at home? So it's a case of being caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, as there is the fear that Nigeria might record rapid transmission of this disease. For an example was what happened in Ghana. And so, with the easing of the lockdown, will it be business as usual? Are businesses, both formal and informal, prepared to take responsibility of protecting their health and that of their workers? What should be the new normal going forward? How can businesses ensure workers are confident they are safe? Business owners confident they won't be sued if they get it wrong. And of course, customers and clients confident enough to spend their money. To answer some of these puzzles, I'm being joined by the CEO, Coleman Wires, Mr. George Onofowoka, and of course I have in our Abuja studio a development strategist, Dr. Emeka Okengwu. Good morning, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, Dr. Okengwu, I start with you. What was your immediate fear and concerns when the president announced the gradual easing of lockdown in these states?
Well, I had 3 fears from 3 broad perspectives. One is what you might be able to call your environmental stabilization, the demands of both governments, or the responsibility of governments, and then the demands of the citizens. I had my fears with social distancing and social contracting, where you have the new economic order or the new normal, if you may. I also had my fears with now what you call the palliatives, and then what we actually mean by palliatives. Because when you're talking about palliatives, everybody seems to think it's all about foods. And if you give me a minute to be able to now take, these fears a little bit, just I'll be able to explain it further. At the level of, what you might be able to call your environmental stabilization is where you have your decontamination. Have government been able to do this? Have we decontaminated? Have we done a lot of this contamination? Have we provided the facilities that can also now support, post-decontamination? The kind of things that can be able to now make certain that personal hygiene is enforced. Again, from the responsibility of the citizen, have you been able to also educate them very, very well on the need, for personal hygiene? And when you talk about taking responsibility, that it actually starts from that level. And then, is there any enforcement program, also set up in the guidelines, so thus released to enforce this? At the second level, which is even more important, everybody is out in the streets now, okay? You're talking about social distancing. You're talking about new social contracts. You're talking about people opening shops and all that and all that. Are there regulations? And if there are regulations, how are you able to enforce that at every point in time in a bus where you have a 14-seater bus, only 10 people can be able to stay in that bus and stay there comfortably? Now, you also come to talk about the issues of the face masks, and this is very, very important. And to that extent, I think we must be able to give kudos to the governor of Cross River State who had introduced, this mask system, the cloth mask system. It's a novel idea from him. Now, do you have enough of these masks? We even have the one that are reusable now. Can you be able to now make it available to everybody? And again, on a last note, so I don't take a lot of time, when we talk about palliatives, Chimeze, a lot of jobs are going to be lost. A lot of businesses, there's no disposable capital. There's going to be a lot of health issues, trust me. There's going to be a lot of hypertension, diabetes, stress-induced challenges going forward. Has government considered, also looking at the problem of rents, that the greatest challenge people are going to be having if they lose their jobs or they don't lose their jobs or disposable capital is losing their homes? Are we also now looking at probably some kind of rent program as a major input in doing these palliatives? Two are more importantly, you're talking about, everybody keeps talking about those who earn daily wages. I keep saying it, that there are lawyers who earn daily wages. There are doctors who earn daily wages. There are shops people you think are very comfortable who earn daily wages. There are even those who don't even earn the daily wages that probably in a year they're able to get 1 or 2 days done. Now, if you're also talking about your palliatives, how has government set up any program where people with ideas of how we can be able to now get this new normal? Okay, yes, I keep saying it, I've given their best, we should give them kudos, but it is not going to be business as usual going forward. So these are actually my worries.
Okay, hold your thoughts there, Dr. Kyung. Back to you now, Mr. Walker. You are a business owner. So what was your first initial concerns when you heard the president announce the easing of this lockdown? What was it concern, having to have your workers back to work?
I think for us, we fall under the essential industry anyway. So we've actually been able to come back to work earlier than the actual opening. So the electronic and electrical sector of manufacturers have been put on the essential list. So we came back to, some of us came back to work a week ago, some came back to work 2 weeks ago. Now, technically, most of the essential services companies have started practicing, or industries were practicing safety measures in the first place, which basically means making sure that your workers are practicing distances on essentials, and wherever they're working, that in whichever area or position they're working within safety measures, washing your hands, wearing face masks, where necessary, handling equipment the right way. Now, those are become an essential part of life. We are all now living in this new normal. Basically, the same thing that Dr. Emeka said. The fear is, it's not only about the health sector or the health of the workers, because that's critical, let's just say. Now, the fact is, it's not every worker that has been taken back. Let's be sincere. So, let's look at one fact that has just been stated during the Lagos State easing, which said 60% of the workforce. Most people have already cut down more than 60% of their workforce, even up to date. Now, what is the guarantee that even 40 or 30% of the workforce is what is even come back to work today? And those are the new normals we need to take into account. Now, so when we're looking at the business sector and we're looking at the industries and those that are facilitating industry, they've already lost a bit of their workforce. Some cannot get to work, some are incapacitated, some for health reasons cannot make it. So we've already reduced the numbers of workforce. Employment has dropped massively. There's nothing we can do about that. Now, the question is, how do we manage this current health crisis with managing business continuity? If you look at even what the president said, let's be sincere, we don't have an economy that can sustain itself with 65% daily earners, with 35% remaining in the actual formal sector. Now, you're looking at that formal sector, and everybody keeps talking about palliatives for the daily earner. What is the palliative for the formal sector? Because they are also employing about another 35% of the group of the workforce. Now, they're already in crisis. Not all the companies are in essential services. So you're talking maybe about 30% or 40% are under essential services. You have 40% for small-scale businesses, medium-sized to large-scale businesses that don't even fit into this list, that they've had to shut down for the past 5 weeks. Part of this is also crisis that we should see coming. Crisis that we should see coming is, how do they fund their businesses? Some of them have to pay their workers for the past 1 month. I spoke to 1 or 2 companies and say, how are you managing this crisis with regard? Some looked at, okay, we pay a percentage or not. Now, some said, look, if it gets to past their leave period, we can't afford to continue. I've spoken to some banks. Banks, what are you doing? Now, I'm quite encouraged by what CBN has been doing. We're quite encouraged by the stimulus packages. I'm quite encouraged by the 27-page document that the CBN governor put out a couple of days ago, a week ago. That is helping. 15 trillion into so many things, 3.5 trillion into the economy, to develop the economy, 1 trillion into manufacturing programs. Those are 500 billion into direct upgrade of machinery. Those are going to be helpful between the next 3 months to the next 1 year to the next 3 years. But the question is, how do we live in this new normal? We have to accept that we don't have the same comfort that you have in Europe or in developed worlds that we do, where someone can be paid to sit at home. I spoke to, some of us are lucky that we have associates in different countries. I was speaking to someone recently and he said he was given £10,000 for his business as a grant from the UK government, free, based on the amount of money he was paying for rates, which is business rates, floor space. And they gave him that as palliatives. Now, we don't have that, and everybody is expecting the same arm of palliatives. We should stop looking at money palliatives, and I'm emphasizing on that, basically. Why I'm emphasizing on that is that we don't have the same tax payment regime. We are not paying as much taxes as those guys do. Now, we can't expect the same returns. Now, we have to look at our own situation, our own problems, and provide solution through our own problems. If I'm not getting that much taxes, I know that most of the formal sector pay taxes. Not all the informal sectors pay taxes. So how do we create incentives to get these people continuously working, but being able to provide health and safety? Very importantly,
yeah,
in the
because
system.
we're talking about health issues here, and one thing that comes to mind here when the president made this announcement is the issue of even people, your workers, of course, who are returning to work would have to join the public buses.
Yeah.
This morning I noticed that the buses were jam-packed. That's an issue. So that calls for, okay, how do businesses plan to restructure to really ensure that they maintain that social distancing? All right, Dr. Kongo, let me come to you. We know that it's health is wealth. A sick individual cannot be productive. The dilemma here now is to have healthy workers and at the same time ensure productivity and growth of the economy. What should businesses be doing now going forward as we fight this pandemic?
There are two things involved here. One is the individual himself, and then his immunity. Okay, remember that everybody says that immunity is at the heart and soul of beating this scourge. Okay, so what are those things that you need to be able to make sure that the immune systems or immune functionalities of everybody around you is optimized? This is where you're getting your phyto support. Okay, your plant extract. This is where everybody is talking about Madagascar finding a cure. What they actually found, was an organic plant that helps them to, build immunity, and then the body begins to fight off. Because you see, the biggest hospital that you carry around is your body. Everything, God has created the white blood, the red blood corpuscles for you to be able to fight off whatever it is. The second will now be what you can call your official protocols or your office protocols. I was sharing some thoughts with a friend of mine who is heading an agency, and I said, you see, what's going to happen is that everybody or people like you have stayed home, isolated well, locked your gates, sent everybody away, they have opened the gates. Your workers are going to be coming from these communities, and they must bring files for you to sign. They must go into your offices and clean them. They must touch your doorknobs for them to enter. And as they're entering, trust me, if they have this stuff, they're going to be leaving it on those surfaces. So it is not about just doing one simple decontamination or whatever. You also now need to make certain that every office that receives visitors, has the proper facilities to be able to make certain that everybody who is coming in and everybody who must come in, is secured. How do you do this? Again, I keep telling you, Chimes, this time we'll have a conversation. We have so much blessings in natural resources. We've done so much research in natural resources that we can be able to actually use our plant extracts to begin to support these things. And it's not so expensive. I'm happy my brother is in the healthcare sector. Maybe he might be able to throw some more lights. Simple ginger teas, simple garlic teas, simple this. And offices should start making these, kind of provisions for their staff. Okay, so that you make certain that you now have organic sanitizers, organic hand washers. And then again, I keep saying to you, the model that Cross River State brought is actually a model we should try to, interrogate some more. Remember that when the man first came and said everybody should wear cloth masks, people thought he was a jester. But today, WHO has found, credibility in wearing, the cloth masks, and that being the fact that now what we need to do is that if you're going to be making cloth masks available, now how would you now make it safe? Okay, because you keep talking about safety. It's one thing to wear these masks, it's another thing to make certain that you also decontaminate, okay, when you finish wearing for reuse. So it is supposed to be something that we should truly think through. But most of all, I think we should develop, for me, we should be able to establish a new task force. And how do we do this? All these security agencies, I see some in your gate, I see some. You can be able to bring these people together, Peace Corps and how. They can become these new champions that can begin to now drive this process, because you must have enforcement.
All right, Dr.
If you don't have
Kengu.
enforcement, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, Dr. Kengu, we really don't have much time here. Let me ask you, Mr. Onofu, while you're listening, and we're talking about rules now and regulation, of course, which managers like you would have to really enforce in your business area. So what possible rules and restructuring businesses like yours can actually put in place in terms of numbers, using equipment, stagger shift times, and, of course, maximizing homework?
I think a lot of the businesses are already applying most of the social distances, because it's not everybody that was sitting at home. So for some of us that had to go to work every day, we have to go back home, and we all have families. So safety is essential when you have to look at what you're going to do, and for those that are working with you. Now, for those bringing files to you, you're already practicing social distancing. I can't remember when last I shook someone's hand in my office. So nobody is looking for that anymore. It's no disrespect not to shake someone anymore. It's a nod is good enough.
It's now a new normal.
It's a new normal. So we're understanding that. Once people even understand simple things as it's no more disrespect, because you have to look at fundamentally some things are cultural changes. Now, Nigerians, we're very cultural dependent people, where we actually acknowledge our heritage irrespective of where you come from. And now, today, people don't mind if they don't get greeted closely or in distance or in their format. So things like that, you have to look at that. Things like what he's saying in terms of what do you drink, what do you eat, how do you perform your duties within the workforce. It has changed, and those are being practiced now.
All right, let's just hope we get it right there. Thank you
I
very
hope
much,
so.
Mr. Nofuoka. He's the CEO, Coleman Wires and Cable. And of course, there in our Abuja studio, Dr. Emeka Okengo, a development strategist. Thank you very much for being on the show. We'll take a quick break now. And when we come back, what is the future of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement with COVID-19 here? We'll get to know after the break. So stay with us.